Hello, hope everybody's doing well. Today, in this little talk, we're going to look at global human resources. How to manage resources of people, basically when you work overseas. And there are obviously a lot of different issues that come up from when you're managing and developing your business onshore in your home country. And those things are much different and usually a lot more complex when you go to other markets and try to manage people in a foreign country. Please, there's a PowerPoint on this on global HR. So please call that up as we follow along with this lecture, so you can see where we're going. First thing I want to say is that global human resources, it's very important because it really, the success of your venture there when you try to work overseas, especially if you're starting something new like an entrepreneurial tweak, adjustment, or a brand new business in another country, it's going to be extremely dependent upon the people you have in place. All business is dependent on the people you have in place, and I would always encourage you to always get the very best people, the most flexible, and the most talented people you can possibly get with your budget, because that's how business works. You're in competition with other people and other businesses, so the better your people are, the greater chance you have for success. So when you look at cross-border opportunities, or when you think about working across borders, you usually you have a group of people that are very experienced at this. That people have spent most of their careers overseas. For me, for example, most of my career has been working offshore, working internationally, and living overseas and doing business overseas. And there are a lot of people like that. It's not always necessary, but you do with a bit of track record. If you think I'm going to send this person here and they've done it in a bunch of different markets before, they have a certain edge because they understand how things work or how things don't work, and that they can make those kind of adjustments. There are also people that on the ground there that are going to be very good that you can hire, because you don't need a person that you're hiring in that country to also move around. Maybe you just want to focus on getting good quality people there. And that's really an important thing as well. So let's look at the next slide for a second. Expatriates are people living and working in non-native countries, and mostly they have parent country expatriates. You're from the home office, and you get sent around to start new businesses, to manage businesses, to grow businesses, or just to fill staff positions, etc. And then there are third country nationals that say your company is already working overseas, and you have someone that's been very successful, a French person's been very successful in Paris, and you're thinking of moving to Spain, and you think, well, this person's already in Europe and they've done a really great job in France. Would it be useful would it work for me to send that person to Spain? And once that starts happening, then that person becomes a third country national, and they can move to a lot of different places and do similar jobs. And that's happening quite a lot more these days than previously. Now, traditionally, an expatriate model was that you recruited from the home country, and then you trained them, you gave them all this culture background, and they were really one of your people. They were a person that was homegrown, home developed, and you sent them, but the idea was they would come back. You sent them out and they would come back, and a lot of us worked that way in the past. And so the idea is that you have a very strong corporate culture, and you take that culture with you, but you're always a head office person representing, working, and doing business in the foreign country. And then once you're good at that, they usually tend to move you around. So once you do this, you go a lot of different places, and your performance is really a judge on how well you're able to work in that new country and make it happen. If you're there to start something brand new, to make that happen. If you're to carry on or to replace somebody, whatever that happens to be. More common these days is global staffing, where people are recruited from all over the world, particularly in the home country. Now, and that's very important because previously, people thought that if say I'm in France and I have a company and I need to send somebody to Italy, I want a French person in Italy because they'll understand what we need in head office, and maybe they won't match up so well in Italy, but at least we'll always get along in terms of the communication, etc., and understand our goals and objectives. More recently, people have thought, well, there's probably a really good group of people in Italy that are cheaper, local, and have high and really known and understand the market, and maybe they should go more that way and hire locally. Added to that is the fact that kind of the business teaching, business schools, either undergraduate or graduate, are quite the same all around the world. So it's quite possible that in your classes here, you'll have people from Italy, Spain, all over the place. And in fact, of course, most everybody is the majority of people are from other places at FIU. So those people say, yeah, they have the home country knowledge and the advantage of a U.S.-based business education, and that really goes a long way. So I think that helps, because a lot of times that does improve the communication, that does improve the understanding, because you've talked the same business language, even if your cultures and other things might be quite different. So the advantages of the first way, of the old traditional way, where you send a home office person, is that they're very loyal to you. They understand that they are going and coming back. They represent the company more firmly, and it's unlikely that they'll be pulled in directions away from your main goals by the local environment. On the other side, if you hire a person locally, they'll get probably more effective quicker in the market. They have contacts, they really know what's going on, and they speak the language. And your downside is that they may not feel the same affinity towards the head office. If you ask them to move to another place, they say, I'm not moving, I'm going to quit, I like it here at my country. And they may be affected by relationships and business practices locally that you may find to be challenging. So those are the main things of the differences. Expatriates have problems. Again, I've been an expatriate many times, and I've managed expatriates a lot. I've had responsibility for big groups of people in Latin America and in Europe, and living in other countries. And there are some issues with them. Often the manager is unable to really adapt. You send someone to a place and they want to go, or they think it's at the right time for their promotion, etc. But they get there and they don't really adapt very well. The things, I think a useful way to think is that it's different in different places. Not better or worse, it's different. So you have to think it's not worse, it's different. So how do I adjust? If you think everything's better or worse in your home country, you're going to add up to a lot of things that you don't like. And that's what a lot of people do. A lot of people get to a place like, and they don't like the driving, they don't like traffic, they don't like the noise. And they say, well, they're obviously not from Miami because we're used to that. So, but it's true. Like, if you go to a place, if you're from someplace and you have to drive in some countries, it just drives you crazy. It drives some people crazy, and so you have to realize it's just different. They drive differently here. They don't drive worse or better. It's just why are they doing that? Let's get along. So you have to really adapt to the culture. And then there's a big issue with the spouse, a male or a female, because often in these other countries that the expatriate is sent to, that spouse cannot work because the spouse does not have a work visa that allows them to work in this country, or maybe not right away. Maybe that person's used to working. Maybe that person gave up a very nice career to follow the spouse that's got this international opportunity and is not fitting in, or is even resentful, or just can't find a way to occupy their time. It doesn't speak the language. There's nothing more thrilling than going to be sent to a foreign country on your first day of work. You blast off and get there office at 7 o'clock. You stay till 7 or 9 or whatever. Then you have dinner with some colleagues, and you come home, and the whole time your spouse has been sitting there trying to figure out, where's the move, where do I hang the pictures, and I don't know anybody, anything. I don't even know how to get around. That happens a lot. So you'll be very aware of the challenges that both the person that's working and the spouse face. You have family-related problems, same thing. You're pulling a whole family out often, and there are many elements to that, and that can cause problems. Some people really enjoy it, other people don't. Some people love to move, other people hate it, other people are adaptable, and other people less so. And maybe just something simple, like maybe your daughter is just an outstanding ballerina, and she's 11 years old, and you've got a projection that 11, 12, 13, 14, and then she's at Juilliard, and all that, and all of a sudden you move someplace where there's no ballet, and that dream ends. And because if you miss 2 or 3 years of that kind of training, you'll never catch up. It happens all the time. So you have to be really aware of these things when you're being considered for that kind of posting, or when you're posting people. Really sound out what their whole situation is, because you want to make sure that it's a good fit. There's also a lot of inability to cope with responsibility. When you're overseas, all of a sudden you don't have a bunch of people to turn around to and ask questions. Like, you're really used to in a huge company environment or big company environment, that anything happens, you got people up, down, sideways, all around to just check on things like, what should I do? What do you think? And not only is it institutionalized, but it's mandatory, but also it's comforting. And you may not think, I hate always having to check with everybody, but in a way, it's nice to think that it's not all my issue to think about. When you're overseas, it's completely different. Of course, now the communications is much higher and much better. But basically, you're there to make decisions, to do the work, and not to create more issues for your head office. So you'll find that when you're all of a sudden your responsibilities and your accountabilities and also your breadth of your decision making go up astronomically, and you have to be ready for that, trained for that, and willing to accept that responsibility, make the correct decisions, and make timely decisions. Your head office is not going to hear from you all the time about every little thing. I mean, I had we had one of my representatives in Argentina once. He was calling me about the size of the desk he should buy to fill out the office, and he was talking about really a matter of inches on the desk. I didn't know what to say. I really can't talk about this. This is not what you're there for. It doesn't make any difference to me or anyone else how big the desk is. Do it, but that gives you an indication of that kind of what you're going to have to be dealing with. If they're having trouble with those kind of decisions, just think about making major ones and negotiations, etc. So you have to be careful with that, and realize some people need a lot more support than others. There's sometimes a lack of technical competence. You send somebody to a place and they really know what they're doing because they're not from there, and they don't know what's going on, but they get sent anyway. Often, and that can happen a lot, and it leads to a lot of disruption because sometimes your business partner and the market dynamics there realize this person really doesn't know what they're doing, and so that leads to kind of a lot of issues. Sometimes I lack motivation. There's another thing always called representitis, and the thing is, when you're overseas for any length of time, outside of head office, you start wondering. You feel something. You can feel like abandoned. You can feel isolation. You can even think about, what are they saying about me in head office? I wonder if so and so now they're getting in good with the management. And I'm out here in the middle of nowhere struggling like crazy. I can't make it work. It's so much harder than I thought it was going to be. I'm not being that successful. And I hear through the grapevine that the people I used to be working with there are now moving up and they're getting good looks by the top management there, etc. That happens. That really does happen. You have to be careful when you send somebody overseas that you keep in touch with them, keep them feeling warm and fuzzy feelings. And when you're overseas, you think, that's this feeling of being away you're away. Things are different. So you have to learn to adjust to that and become much more self-sufficient, much more confident in how you work and how you go about your day. Most people tend to love that. I mean, I thought that my best, I always thought that your happiness at work is a correlation between how far away you are from head office. The further away you are, the happier you are, and I think that's kind of true for me. I really loved working overseas like that and having those opportunities, and you may also. So you have to really kind of think to yourself, is that what I would be looking for? Or do I feel better if I'm closer to the action and head office? That kind of thing. This next slide is a quick thing on what expat compensation is all about. That's why it's a big issue, and that's why sometimes companies hire more locally. You end up covering a lot of expenses that usually the housing, the car, the schooling. Schools always charge a lot of money because they know that companies are paying for it, so they charge a ton. You can't pay for that yourself. The company has to pay. And then for your car, they usually pay the difference between what a car would cost here in the States and there, because usually they're more expensive. And housing, the same thing. And then they look at your health and all that, and then your tax situation. Tax situation is very complex often because the United States might tax you on your income here. They're going to look at your global income, and the local country may or may not tax you on your global earnings, even though you're being paid in the States. It's complex. Sometimes the working through of that becomes a very big tax liability for the company. So you'll often see that after 3 or 4 years, they'll pull the person back because the accumulated taxable benefit of them helping you with your tax in different jurisdictions can become quite high. So you'll have to realize that there's a tax-related cost, yes or no, high or low, to having a domestic person in a foreign market. That's something to be really aware of. Finally, I just want to show you a couple pictures here. There's a lot there's a lot of fun involved. This is Rio de Janeiro, and that red arrow there is where my apartment was on Leblon Beach when I lived there. So it's not all bad. And then of course there's Carnival, and then when I was able to work in England and Italy and Brussels and on a lot of different places in Asia. So it's it really there. You think, okay, there's a lot of downsides, but man, your day-to-day life can be very exciting, can be very thrilling, and it can just be different. You just don't feel like you just want more. And so I think a lot of times in business you think, how can I make a difference? What can I do differently? And I find that the opportunity to work in overseas, and especially in this kind of concept of international entrepreneurship, to do something new overseas, to do something different, can be quite exciting and give you a chance to round out your life in a way that you won't get just staying home. Okay, I hope that helps, and talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.